the mechanic and his morning ritual. The hum of the orbital dock was the only alarm Elias Carter needed. The steady thrum of engines, plasma welders, and loose panels rattling against bulkheads was a lullaby to most workers. But to Elias, it was a wake-up call. He shuffled into his workshop with his most sacred possession clutched in hand, a battered stainless steel mug, filled to the brim with dark, bitter coffee. "Good morning, sweetheart," he muttered, not to any colleague, but to the mug itself. Elias Carter was a man held together by two things, wrenches and caffeine. At 43, with grease under his fingernails and hair perpetually smelling of machine oil, he had become something of a legend around Dock 7. Ships came in falling apart, and Elias sent them back out running smoother than ever. His co-workers swore he could coax an engine core into singing again, but only after his fourth cup of the day. That morning was no different, at least at first. The scrapyard side of the dock was cluttered with misdelivered freight, forgotten crates, and scrap metal piled high. Elias had gotten into the habit of poking around between jobs. You never knew what kind of old parts you could salvage. As he sipped his coffee and kicked aside a broken stabilizer fin, something caught his eye, a crate he didn't recognize. It was squat, metallic, with warning glyphs scrawled in half a dozen languages. Unlike the rest of the junk, this one radiated a faint heat. A low, pulsing hum emanated from it, almost like a living heartbeat. Elias frowned and took another long gulp. "Well, definitely not a fuel regulator," he muttered. He set down his mug on a stack of parts and pried at the crate seal with his crowbar. Sparks danced where metal fought metal. Then the panel gave way with a hiss of steam. The scent that poured out was strange: ozone, copper, and something faintly sweet like burned sugar. Inside, curled up in the shadows, was something that made Elias nearly drop his mug. A small creature, no larger than a cat, with iridescent scales that shimmered in shifting blues and purples. Its wings were too big for its body, folded awkwardly against its sides. Its tail twitched, tipped with a glowing nub of bioluminescent flesh. Most striking of all were its eyes, large, round, and shifting through colors like oil on water. Elias blinked. Well, hell, either I'm more sleep-deprived than I thought, or someone just shipped me a dragon. The creature whimpered, a sound somewhere between a kitten's mewl and the hiss of a plasma torch. It looked frail, trembling with each breath. Against his better judgment, Elias reached in. The scales felt warm, almost feverish, and the dragon flinched before curling toward his hand. "Easy there, Sparks," he said gently, pulling it out. "You're not exactly in the manifest, are you?" As he cradled the creature, it sniffed the air, its gaze fixed on a coffee mug sitting beside the crate. Elias frowned as the dragon perked up, wings twitching with sudden energy. "You want my coffee?" He chuckled. "Buddy, you and I might have a problem." The dragon squirmed out of his hands, wobbling unsteadily across the workbench until it pressed its snout to the mug. It inhaled deeply, eyes glowing brighter. Then it made a strange chirruping sound, eerily similar to the gurgle of Elias's beloved coffee machine when brewing. Elias rubbed his temple. "Great. I find the galaxy's weirdest pet, and it's got the same addiction I do." He looked around the workshop. No one had seen him yet. No dock master breathing down his neck. No mercs demanding paperwork. Just him, his mug, and the dragon. The creature climbed clumsily onto his sleeve, claws pricking lightly at his jacket, and nestled against his chest with a sigh. Elias froze, coffee halfway to his lips. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "First contact, and the thing imprints on me." For the first time that morning, his coffee tasted different. Not bad, not weaker, just different. Like the day had shifted on its axis. Elias Carter, mechanic extraordinaire, fixer of failing starships, and sworn servant of caffeine, had just inherited the strangest responsibility of his life. The dragon yawned, releasing a tiny puff of smoke that curled lazily toward the ceiling. It didn't look like much now. Too scrawny, too awkward, but something in its gaze told Elias it was anything but ordinary. "All right, Sparks," Elias sighed, draining his mug in one go. "Looks like you're stuck with me. Let's just hope you're less trouble than you look." The dragon purred, a sound like a miniature engine revving to life. Elias set his mug down and reached for his wrench. Somehow, he knew this day would not end with just another ship repair. Trouble brewing. Elias Carter had never hidden contraband before. Spare parts salvaged from the scrapyard, sure. A tool borrowed from another workshop, definitely. But a dragon? That was new. The creature perched on his workbench, head tilted, eyes shimmering with shifting colors. Elias leaned on his stool, sipping from his second mug of the morning, staring back. "Can't keep calling you Sparks," he muttered. "You'll need a name. Something fitting for a grease monkey's stowaway." The dragon chirped and promptly bit down on a loose gear. Its teeth scraped against the metal, producing an ear-splitting squeal before the gear snapped in two. The little creature looked ridiculously pleased with itself. Elias groaned. "Sprocket. Yeah, that's what I'll call you. You're small, noisy, and you chew through things you shouldn't." "Sprocket it is." The dragon, Sprocket, flapped its mismatched wings awkwardly, knocking over a jar of bolts. They clattered across the workbench, rolling onto the floor. Elias buried his face in his hands. "Perfect. Not even an hour with you, and my shop looks like a plasma grenade went off." Still, there was something undeniably endearing about the creature. It purred when nestled in his coffee-stained jacket, nibbled at the steam rising from his mug, and seemed fascinated by the hum of every machine in the shop. When Elias started up his plasma torch, Sprocket leaned forward, eyes glowing bright blue as though the flame itself was a lullaby. But the charm wore thin once the rumors started circulating. By midday, Dock 7 buzzed with unease. Elias overheard hushed voices in the corridors, mercenary patrols asking questions, dock masters swearing they hadn't seen anything unusual, whispers of the Xyrix consortium losing something valuable. Elias tightened his grip on his mug. He'd heard of the Xyrix before, ruthless biotech barons who manufactured creatures as weapons, blending science with cruelty. If Sprocket belonged to them, handing the dragon back would be the easiest way to avoid trouble. He looked down at the dragon curled in a pile of oily rags. Sprocket blinked up at him, eyes shimmering like shifting galaxies, and let out a tiny snore that puffed smoke rings into the air. "Yeah," Elias muttered. "You're definitely trouble." The workshop's door slid open with a hiss. Elias tensed, mug halfway to his lips, but relaxed when he saw the familiar insectoid figure of Rixa. She clicked her mandibles in greeting. "Carter, you heard the news. About the consortium? Hard to miss." Elias set his mug down. "They lose a crate?" Rixa's antennae twitched. "Not just a crate. An asset. Genetic property. They're sending hunters. Dock 7 is under scan." Her multifaceted eyes narrowed. "You should hide anything unusual." Elias forced a laugh. "Me? What could I possibly have worth stealing?" At that moment, Sprocket sneezed from beneath the rags, sending a puff of smoke drifting into the air. Vrix's head swiveled, mandibles clicking sharply. Elias coughed loudly, waving his hands to disperse the smoke. "Bad wiring in the vents." "I'll fix it." Vrixa studied him for a long moment before finally shrugging. "If you say so. Just be careful, Carter. The consortium doesn't forgive theft." When she left, Elias slumped into his chair. He grabbed Sprocket, glaring at the little dragon. "You heard that? Hunters. Genetic property. That's what you are." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I should give you up. Let them deal with you." Sprocket licked a drop of coffee from his sleeve and chirped happily. "Damn it," Elias muttered. "I can't." That night, the mercenaries came. Their heavy boots echoed through the corridors of Dock 7. Doors were forced open, workshops searched, workers questioned. Elias sat at his workbench, mug steady in his hands, while Sprocket hid inside the hollow shell of an old coffee machine. The little dragon pressed against the steaming coils, its glow dimmed to a faint shimmer. The door slid open, and 3 mercenaries stepped in, armor glinting under the workshop lights. Their leader scanned the room with cold, reptilian eyes. "Mechanic," he growled. "We're looking for stolen property. Living. Dangerous. You seen anything unusual?" Elias sipped his coffee slowly, meeting the mercenary's gaze. "Only unusual thing here is how you lot think you'll find anything in my mess." The soldiers began rifling through his tools and scrap. One of them paused near the coffee machine. Elias's heart pounded. The mercenary sniffed the air. His nostrils flared. "Strange," he muttered. "I smell the specimen." Elias tightened his grip on his wrench beneath the table, forcing a lazy grin. "What you smell is the strongest Terran coffee in this sector. One whiff, and you'll never forget it." The mercenary scowled, but after a tense silence, he turned away. The group filed out, leaving Elias sitting in the quiet, sweat beading his brow. Once the door sealed, he exhaled and pulled Sprocket out of the machine. The dragon blinked, yawned, and promptly curled back up in Elias's lap. "Yeah," Elias whispered, stroking its glowing scales. "Trouble brewing? All right. Fire, steel, and caffeine." Elias Carter had always believed there were two kinds of problems in life: the kind you could fix with a wrench and the kind you could fix with a stronger cup of coffee. Unfortunately, mercenary gunships didn't fit neatly into either category. By dawn, Dock 7 buzzed with panic. 2 ships had already been impounded by Xyrix patrols, and rumors spread that anyone caught hiding consortium property would be vented into space. Elias sat in his cluttered workshop, running a hand through his grease-streaked hair while sipping his 5th mug of the day. Sprocket was sprawled on the workbench, wings twitching as if dreaming. The dragon had grown overnight, its bioluminescent veins glowing brighter, tail flicking with more force. Elias eyed it grimly. "You're growing faster than I can keep you hidden," he muttered. The door slid open and Vrixa rushed in, her antennae jerking with urgency. "Carter, they're closing the dock. Hunters are sweeping every bay. If you're going to run, it has to be now." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And run where?" "In what?" "My last working ship's a gutted cargo hauler with more holes than hull." "Then patch it." Vrixa shoved a datapad into his hands. "I've diverted the scans for now, but they'll reach this bay within the hour." Elias stared at the datapad, then at Sprocket, who had rolled over and was nibbling on a bolt. He downed the rest of his coffee in one gulp and slammed the mug onto the table. "Fine," he said. "If they want him, they'll have to chase us." The cargo hauler was a relic, parked in a forgotten hangar at the far end of the dock. Its engines were half disassembled, wiring chewed bare by time and rats. But Elias had never met a ship he couldn't bully back into service. With Vrix's extra hands tightening bolts and Sprocket curled in the cockpit, Elias worked like a man possessed, his veins thrumming with caffeine and adrenaline. When the mercenaries finally breached the hangar, the hauler's engines roared to life. The battered ship lurched off the platform, sputtered, then shot into the void in a blaze of fire. "Hold together, sweetheart," Elias muttered, gripping the controls. "Just long enough to get us clear." But the Xyrix weren't about to let him go. 3 sleek interceptors peeled away from their formation, their weapons locking onto his ship. "Unregistered vessel." A cold voice crackled through the comms. "Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Elias flipped the comm switch and took a long sip from his thermos. "Sorry, boys. Boarding's by invitation only, and I don't remember sending you one." The first shots streaked past, scorching the hauler's hull. Sprocket shrieked, wings flaring with light. The dragon scrambled up onto the console, scales sparking as though reacting to the danger. Elias grabbed the controls tighter as alarm screamed. "Don't you dare fry my systems," he snapped. Sprocket's eyes blazed white. The little dragon opened its mouth and unleashed a burst of plasma, fire through the cockpit glass. It streaked into space, colliding with an interceptor. The enemy ship spun out of formation, hull blackened by the sudden blast. Elias gawked. "You've been holding out on me." The other 2 ships surged forward. Elias wrenched the hauler into a dive, barely avoiding another volley. His hands shook, half from nerves, half from too much caffeine, but the rush sharpened his reflexes. He juked left, throttled up, and managed to slip between an asteroid cluster. The mercenaries followed. Sprocket hissed, its glow brightening in sync with Elias's pounding heartbeat. Every gulp of coffee seemed to fuel not just Elias's focus, but the dragon's power. When Elias slammed the thrusters, Sprocket shrieked and spat another ball of plasma, searing a chunk off an asteroid and scattering debris into their pursuer's path. The mercenaries broke formation. One ship was crushed against a drifting rock, the other crippled by flying shrapnel. Only one remained on their tail, dogged and relentless. Elias pushed the hauler harder, systems overheating, alarms howling. Come on, don't give up on me now. Sprocket leapt onto his shoulder, eyes blazing. The dragon pressed its snout against his temple, and suddenly Elias felt it. An electric bond, a surge of energy that wasn't just his own. His jittery caffeine high merged with Sprocket's bioluminescence, the two of them pulsing in unison. The dragon roared, tiny but fierce, and spat a final plasma burst that streaked straight into the last interceptor's engine. The mercenary vessel erupted in a blossom of fire. The silence that followed was deafening. Elias sagged back in his chair, panting, his thermos rattling in his trembling hand. Well, he wheezed. Guess we're officially on the consortium's most wanted list. Brix's voice crackled over the comm. You just destroyed 3 Xyrix interceptors with a coffee-drunk lizard. Do you realize what you've done? Elias glanced at Sprocket, who curled contentedly against his chest, glowing faintly like an overcharged power core. Yeah, Elias said softly. I've made a choice. Humanity, dragons, and coffee. The stars above the barren asteroid glittered coldly as Elias Carter sat slumped in the cockpit, his thermos half empty and his nerves shot. The cargo hauler wheezed like an asthmatic mule, every warning light on the console glowing. Still, it was alive, and so was he. Sprocket slept curled on his lap, wings rising and falling with each tiny breath. The dragon's scales pulsed faintly, as though echoing Elias's own heartbeat. The bond between them had only deepened after the battle. But respite didn't last. The ship's sensors shrieked, pulling Elias out of his daze. He leaned forward, jaw tightening as a massive shadow filled the screen. A Xyrix warship, twice the size of Dock 7 itself, was descending from hyperspace. Of course, Elias muttered, reaching for his thermos. Couldn't just let me enjoy one quiet cup. The warship's comms flared to life. A distorted voice, oily and confident, filled the cockpit. Human mechanic, you are in possession of consortium property. Surrender the specimen, and we will grant you a quick death. Elias stared at the mug in his hand, then at the dragon stirring in his lap. He thought about long nights fixing broken engines, the quiet comfort of coffee, and the tiny creature who decided, for some cosmic joke or miracle, to cling to him. He flicked the comm switch. Listen, pal, you could take my ship, you could take my tools, but you'll have to pry this little guy from my cold, caffeinated hands. The reply was laughter, dark and cruel. Then the Xyrix launched their hunters. Elias sprang into motion. He staggered into the engine bay, wrench in one hand, mug in the other. The hauler's reactors were overheating, the thrusters patched with little more than stubbornness and spit. Perfect conditions for improvisation. All right, sweetheart, he murmured to the ship. One last dance. Sprocket bounded after him, eyes glowing brighter with every gulp Elias took from his thermos. The dragon's scales sparked, resonating with his heartbeat. Elias grinned, despite himself. Let's give them hell, buddy. Back in the cockpit, he pushed the thrusters into overdrive. The hauler groaned, shuddered, and blasted into the void, weaving between the hunters. Weapons fire lit the darkness, scorching his hull. Just a little closer, Elias muttered, hands flying across the controls. He rerouted power from life support into the engine coils, overclocking the reactors. Panels smoked, alarms wailed. Sprocket clambered onto the console, wings unfurling, eyes blazing white. When Elias downed the last of his thermos, the dragon roared. A surge of light erupted from its throat, lancing across the void. The nearest hunter ship disintegrated in a burst of plasma fire. The Xyrix warship responded with a broadside volley, sheer power that dwarfed Elias's battered hauler. Shield screamed. The cockpit shook. Not good, not good, Elias muttered, slamming controls. Then he froze, staring at the mug still clutched in his hand. An idea as insane as it was desperate formed in his caffeine-addled brain. Time to brew something special. He poured the dregs of his strongest, most concentrated coffee onto Sprocket scales. The dragon shuddered, glowing brighter than a star. With a roar that rattled the cockpit, Sprocket leapt into the void through the forward viewport, wings blazing with ion fire. The tiny creature expanded in a flare of light, growing impossibly larger as energy surged through its body. Plasma arcs streaked from its wings as it streaked toward the Xyrix warship. Elias jammed the thrusters, steering his hauler into a dive beneath the massive vessel. At the same moment, Sprocket unleashed a torrent of white-hot flames straight into the warship's reactor bay. The explosion was cataclysmic. Fire bloomed across the Xyrix flagship, tearing through its hull like paper. Elias's hauler was hurled backward by the shockwave, spinning out of control until he wrestled it into a shaky drift. When the light faded, the Xyrix warship was gone. Only debris floated in its place. Elias blinked sweat from his eyes, heart hammering. He looked out through the cracked viewport, terrified he'd lost Sprocket in the blast. Then, through the haze of debris, a familiar glow emerged. The dragon was smaller again, drifting weightlessly, wings folded. It flapped clumsily back into the cockpit and collapsed against Elias's chest, exhausted but alive. Elias laughed, half mad with relief. Guess coffee really does work miracles. Word spread quickly across the sector. A lone human mechanic and his dragon had destroyed a Xyrix warship. Smugglers, dockhands, and outlaws whispered about the bond between Terran Caffeine and a creature of fire. The consortium went silent, licking its wounds. Back at Dock 7, Elias returned to his workshop with Sprocket perched proudly on his shoulder. Vrixa met him at the door, antennae twitching in disbelief. "You took down a warship," she said flatly. "With coffee." Elias shrugged, pouring himself a fresh mug. "Some folks fight with fleets. Some with faith. Me? I've got coffee in him." Sprocket chirped, snout dipping toward the mug. Elias grinned and held it just out of reach. "Don't push your luck, kid. This one's mine." He leaned back in his chair, savoring the steam rising from his cup. For once, the galaxy seemed quiet. But deep down, Elias knew one thing for certain. Life with a dragon and a steady supply of coffee would never be ordinary again.